Tonight, police deny racially profiling after wrongfully arresting a former immigration detainee over sexual assault. Also tonight, Telstra apologises after a patient dies during a 000 outage overnight. Israeli troops accused of opening fire on Palestinians desperately seeking food. And on Stateline, we speak to voters in Melbourne's southeast ahead of a crucial by-election. Good evening, Iskhander Razak with ABC News. Victoria Police have denied that racial profiling was behind the wrongful arrest of a former immigration detainee in Melbourne yesterday. While advocates are calling for an independent review into the case of mistaken identity, a number of federal Liberals who are quick to raise the issue are holding their ground.
A former immigration detainee was arrested and charged following an alleged sexual assault on this Melbourne street. But last night it was revealed the 44-year-old man had been wrongly accused. Electronic monitoring data put the former detainee in the wrong place at the wrong time. But police said he also looked like the actual alleged offender, pictured, who's now been arrested. Police said they were about the same age, height and ethnicity.
Sounds a lot like racial profiling.
Not at all. Based on the descriptions and the evidence we had at that time, there was grounds for the arrest. They looked very much alike.
It is an example of racial profiling and even more specifically, the political profiling of a very tiny subset of the population.
It's lazy policing, it's inappropriate, it is racial profiling.
Advocates want an independent review and for politicians to stop weaponising it, as in question time yesterday. Despite the mistake, the Deputy Liberal leader refused to delete this tweet, linking what she called foreign criminals to the upcoming by-election in the southeast Melbourne seat of Dunley.
I think it's entirely reasonable that you would make the points that we made yesterday. And I guess the general point that we were making is that the Albanese government's released 149 people, hardened criminals, from immigration detention.
Being wrongly charged and wrongly named and shamed by the police and named in federal parliament by bad faith actors. It is absolutely appalling.
The police and authorities should be allowed to do their job free of this preemptive political game playing.
Politics never far from immigration. Kate Ashton, ABC News, Melbourne.
Telstra's CEO has today apologised to the family of a Melburnian who died after calls for help weren't immediately transferred to paramedics. The telco says it's investigating why its operators were unable to connect callers to 000 workers early this morning. The ambulance union says the system breakdown caused complete chaos.
They're the first responders in emergencies. But in the early hours of this morning, the system transferring 000 calls to emergency service workers failed.
They said it was chaos and they did everything they could. They had to call back a lot of patients who hadn't been able to get through.
When the system is functioning correctly, callers to emergency services are transferred by national Telstra call takers to the appropriate service in their state. But from 3:30 to 5 o'clock this morning, Telstra call takers were forced to email contact details of 148 calls to emergency services. Other calls were transferred manually, with a total of 494 calls affected.
It would have been stressful for the Telstra operators who are trying to capture information and ask questions of the caller who's ringing for the emergency. They're not trained to know what to ask.
The ambulance union says one man in Victoria had a cardiac arrest and died.
There was a delay in the dispatch and that's led to quite a significant delay in the person getting care. Now, whether that's a factor in the person's survival or not, we can never know.
Telstra has promised a forensic investigation, saying it will review its processes.
Can I just first offer my deepest apology to the family of that person and, in fact, to anyone who was impacted.
Multiple states, including Victoria, were affected by this morning's outage, but Telstra is not saying where else it caused problems. The state and federal governments say they'll be seeking answers.
The Australian Communications and Media Authority is undertaking an initial assessment of Telstra's compliance with its regulatory obligations.
Telstra says the service has been stable since 5 a.m.
No call should wait Every call is an emergency.
Sasha Payne, ABC News, Melbourne.
Overseas and growing hunger and desperation has sparked fresh tragedy in Gaza City, with hundreds killed and wounded after piling onto aid trucks that were part of an Israeli-protected convoy. Israeli officials acknowledged their troops opened fire, but say many people were trampled. US President Joe Biden says the incident could derail peace talks between Hamas and Israel. Middle East correspondent Alison Horn has this report and a warning: it contains confronting footage.
The aftermath of the latest bloody chapter in this conflict. These men, women and children hurt or killed while trying to get desperately needed food. What should have been a moment of hope, the delivery of aid to a section of northern Gaza facing famine and starvation, turning deadly. Israel has released this vision, it says, shows crowds swarming the aid trucks. Palestinian health officials say Israeli troops opened fire on the waiting crowd, killing more than 100 and injuring more than 700.
Our children went to get a bag of flour to feed their families, and they ran over our children and shot them.
Israel's military says its troops were there securing the passage of the convoy and claims the crowds approached their forces in a manner that posed a threat to the troops, who responded with live fire. IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari says dozens of Gazans were killed and injured from pushing, trampling and being run over by the trucks.
The tanks that were there to secure the convoy sees the Gazans being trampled and cautiously tries to disperse the mob with a few warning shots.
The UN says it's been unable to deliver food regularly and safely to northern Gaza for more than 5 weeks. Hamas says this incident could derail negotiations for a deal on a temporary ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages. Before the war, Ibrahim Ahmed used to build houses. Now he digs graves, 30 to 40 each day, he says. The sound of Israeli drones, a constant companion.
As a human being with feelings, it feels sad to go from building villas and buildings, which I love, to digging and making graves.
A moment of tenderness for the dead in a war marked by brutality for those living through it. Alison Horn, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Back home, and more than 1,000 firefighters fought to contain the Bayan bushfire when it was at its peak this week. While the major threat has now passed, there's still plenty of work being done to mop up and make the area safe for locals who are returning to their communities. Reporter Natalie Whiting went onto the fire grounds with crews doing this essential work.
That was our sort of half plan today, was to try and get right up and get all this open up and working there. So.
The flames might be gone, but the work continues.
We've got weeks ahead of us at this stage.
From a staging point in Warwick, near where the blaze first took off a week ago, crews are preparing to head back into the Bayan fire ground.
We're into our second week of this fire, so fatigue does start to set in, but spirits are very high, and, you know, this is a win. We've caught this fire, albeit big, we have caught it.
Got many kilometres worth of line to black out, which is essentially walking the entire line, finding hot spots, extinguishing them, digging them out.
Checking for hot spots and firming up the perimeter is essential. While the fire is contained, it's not yet deemed under control.
We can't really stop at this point. You can't take your foot off the gas because that's when things can go wrong.
At this stage, falling trees are one of the biggest dangers.
We'll send crews through identifying hazardous trees, assessing the environment, and then we'll come through with machines to treat those trees and remove that hazard.
There are dozens of teams still working all over this 22,000 hectare fire ground. The numbers will be scaled back in coming days and then it'll rest on the local crews to take over the response.
And we have to remember that that phase can go on for a long time, weeks if not months. So for those crews it's extremely difficult, and this is their patch, this is their backyard.
Being a local crew, it's obviously different emotions. Yeah, just doing our best.
While the attention may fade with the flames, these teams are undeterred.
Flames through the crowns of trees and trucks squirting water, and that's the flashy stuff, but once all that dies down, everyone kind of forgets that the real work comes in containing this fire properly.
Work that doesn't come easy. Natalie Whiting, ABC News, Warwick.
Tributes are flowing for the federal Victorian Labor Senator Lyndall White, who died overnight after a battle with cancer. The former lawyer was a key figure in the union movement and worked for Labor behind the scenes before being elected to the Senate in 2022. She stepped back to focus on her health just a month ago. The Prime Minister has labelled her death, just months after that of fellow Victorian MP Peter Murphy, a tragedy for the Labor Party.
To lose two women in their prime within 3 months of each other is beyond belief. It's just so sad, because Linda White had so much more to give.
Voter anxiety about cost of living and crime are dominating the crucial by-election in the suburban seat of Dunley in Melbourne's southeast. The contest is being framed as a litmus test for both the Prime Minister and his challenger, overshadowing the two major party candidates vying to replace the late Peter Murphy, who was a very popular local MP. The ABC hit the hustings to find out how the candidates will respond to the problems that locals raised.
I'm Richard Willingham. I'm here at the Dunley by-election. This is a critical test with the health of the Albanese government, but also to see whether Peter Dutton and Liberals have what it takes to win government next year. We've been talking to voters about what issues matter to them. What's the biggest issue for you in Dunley?
I think the cost of living that's happening and the rate rises.
Cost of living.
Living expenses, I guess. Electricity, gas, fuel, all that sort of stuff.
If you could ask the candidates one question, what would it be?
What are they going to do about it?
We played these concerns to the Labor and Liberal candidates. What can you do about cost of living?
Instead of spending $40 million advertising these tax changes, I would be funding our food banks to protect the most vulnerable. But also, 10,000...
Do you support those tax changes?
Look, we support lower fare and simpler taxes. We're the party of that. But if you look at what the current government are doing, they're hiring 10,000 bureaucrats in Canberra. What I would be doing is funding more doctors and nurses and teachers, mental health practitioners.
From the 1st of July, I'm really aware that I think it's about 87% of Dunley residents are going to get more of a tax cut under Labor than they would have under the Liberal government, which means people are going to have more money in their back pocket. We've got 5,000 more families getting a better benefit from childcare relief. We've got cheaper medicines out there. We've got the urgent care clinic with bulk billing.
I think people are hearing that message.
Look, the tax changes are happening as we speak. We've got things going on, and I know the Labor government are going to be looking at, what else they can do. We've got, Coles and Woolies being reviewed in terms of the benefits back to the consumers, so they're not, they're not going to be hit in their back pockets.
The other big issue, I'll play you another little clip.
The biggest issue at Dunley, there's a lot of them. I think we're looking at crime.
Crime. Yeah, everyone's a bit scared around here at the moment because it's a lot of youth crime going on, and it needs to be fixed. It's just happening way too much now.
For us, it's more safety and obviously the trying to reduce crime.
The crime now is getting into our community.
Crime is primarily a matter for state government, but the issue is clearly weighing on some locals' minds. Last year, the crime rate in Frankston Council area was higher than the state average. Do you think you can solve that crime perception and problem?
I would be a strong advocate. I've been a youth worker. I've worked in the community sector for 30 years with young people and communities to implement solutions to help engage younger people.
People in Mount Eliza, Carrum Downs are sleeping, older women are sleeping with bats next to them because of it. The people I've spoken to, they come out, you saw it in your video there, crime is one of the #1 priorities for people, and people are sleeping with bats.
In recent months, Peter Dutton and his team have spruiked nuclear power.
We need to have an open conversation about nuclear power. We need to have a conversation about every single energy source.
We're happy to have it in Dunkley.
Look, that's a long time away. But what I do want to focus on is we need to have a sensible energy policy. We need to look at all forms of energy. The idea that this current government is looking at 100% renewable energy is a joke. We need to have a sensible energy policy that includes all forms of energy, that is clean, that is affordable, that is reliable.
Is Australia and Dunkley full? You mentioned immigration.
No, what we need to do is we need to have sensible immigration policy, allowing 600,000 people plus into our country when we have a healthcare crisis, housing crisis and a cost of living crisis is not good.
Nearly 56% of people in Dunkley voted no to the Voice. Labor's Jodie Bellier posted on LinkedIn that the campaign was the worst of white privilege.
Australia is the greatest country in the world to live in, and we are an incredible democracy. I respect that everyone has made choices about the outcome of the referendum and people's choices about that. I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on the future of Dunkley. It was a really difficult debate for everyone, and I respect that. A decision has been made.
But you have comments about the worst of white privilege.
I'm focused on the future of Dunkley.
Do you apologise for those comments?
I'm focused on the future of Dunkley, so yes, and I'm doing my best.
This by-election may not change the government.
This campaign has also highlighted the growing efforts of Advance Australia, a conservative third-party campaigner that found its voice during the referendum. It's published inflammatory ads attacking Labor, but its biggest presence is online. Both sides of politics acknowledge it's making a difference. Have you seen these ads?
Yep.
What do you make of them?
I don't think they're very good at all. I don't think any of the advertising from either party has been appropriate for this election.
I don't think that's the right thing to do, that sort of wording. Bit reprehensible.
Does that change the way you vote, do you think?
Probably, yeah.
This is
maybe, yeah.
No, it wouldn't affect my vote.
In a tight race, every vote is critical. Richard Willingham, ABC News, Carrum Downs.
Join us tomorrow night for our special coverage of the Dunkley by-election. Anthony Green, David Spears and Patricia Carvallis will be bringing you the results and analysis with expert guests. That's tomorrow night from 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Survivors of the 2019 White Island disaster and families of the victims have been awarded nearly $10 million as part of a long-running prosecution of tourism operators in New Zealand. 6 guilty parties were sentenced today, with the largest fine being handed to Whakaari Management, the company behind the Buttle family who owned the volcano. It's been ordered to pay nearly $1 million as a penalty for breaching workplace health and safety laws, as well as nearly half of the total reparation figure. The judge said although the company had no funds, there was a moral obligation to pay. In the wake of a recent massacre that killed 70 people in Papua New Guinea's highlands, attention has turned to the firearms used by villagers. Analysis of videos posted to social media reveal most of the weapons were Australian and American manufactured assault rifles sold to PNG's Defence Force decades ago, and a warning some images in this story may be confronting.
On the way to attack their enemy, men from 3 allied tribes were ambushed. 2 weeks on from this horrific massacre, the death toll continues to climb as bodies are found in nearby rivers and bush, and others die from their injuries. Videos taken in the lead up to the violence reveal clear warning signs and the considerable firepower carried by these tribesmen. Here in January, the Amberlin tribe march in a show of force. At the front, about 9 assault rifles, mainly M16s or AR-15s, American guns that would have been sold to PNG's Defence Forces decades ago.
Guns are not being brought into Papua New Guinea by, evil foreigners. In fact, they're leaking out from state stocks. They're leaking out from the police and the army. Like
this one, the Australian SLR. Thousands were made for PNG's Defence Force before winding up in the highlands.
They're the most popular assault rifle in Papua New Guinea. They're very, very popular with mercenaries because they have good long range, they're very accurate, and they've got a heavy bullet. which makes them lethal at a much longer distance.
This bullpup firearm, a more modern weapon, is designed for urban combat. Bullets sprayed into the air indicate ammunition is also in far greater supply than decades ago. Police sources say they most likely originate from state supplies.
These guns have what we call a long decay curve. They have a long life. If you look after them, they can still be working 100 years from now. And so as long as you can get the ammunition for them, they will remain lethal.
Recent massacres would not be possible without these guns and ammunition, which are allegedly bought and supplied by wealthy tribal leaders, financiers who police will now target in a bid to curb the ongoing bloodshed. Tim Swanston, ABC News, Port Moresby.
The company that owns Facebook says it'll stop paying Australian media for news content when their current deals expire. The tech giant Meta has paid millions of dollars to Australian media companies, including the ABC. The government has slammed the move, but Meta says its customers don't come to its platform for news and political content.
The fight between the Australian media and tech giants is rebooting. Now Facebook's owner Meta is no longer willing to pay for news.
We're not talking about some plucky little startup here. We're talking about one of the world's largest and most profitable companies.
Selfish, derelict and destructive. Few Australian leaders had anything kind to say about the company today.
The government takes the view that this is a dereliction of its responsibility to Australia.
Meta has decided not to renew a deal it struck 3 years ago. Back then, the government passed laws forcing big tech to pay for the use of news. But today, in a statement, Meta said people don't come to Facebook for news and political content. The decision could cost news outlets millions.
And even though we know that these commercial deals are confidential, we are aware of reports that it's some $200 million that will be impacted here.
There are even concerns it might switch off the lights for some smaller players.
For some, it could be fatal that they lose this access to money.
Former ACCC chairman Rod Sims helped negotiate the code 3 years ago.
I think this is a very selfish decision by Meta and Facebook. It means that they're not willing to pay for content that they benefit from.
We need the federal government not to blink here. The very reason this code came into being was to ensure that the digital giants paid their way.
The government has signalled it's unwilling to let this slide.
Nobody should be under any doubt about the government's resolve to ensure that we have a viable media industry in this country.
It's seeking advice on its next steps, which could include compelling Facebook to the bargaining table. Ange Lavoie-Pierre, ABC News.
A Melbourne pharmacy has been raided as part of an ongoing investigation into the illegal manufacture of weight loss medications. Meanwhile, the drug regulator says it wants to ban compounding pharmacists from making copycat versions of the drugs originally intended to treat type 2 diabetes.
It's a shock move backed by doctors.
These rules are there to protect individuals. They're not there to be exploited by big business.
The TGA has written to doctors and pharmacy groups about its intention to crack down on copycat versions of popular diabetes drugs.
We welcome the letter. However, we just want to ensure that it doesn't ban compounding outright.
When medications like Ozempic and Mounjaro are in short supply, pharmacists can make their own versions, which aren't tested for safety or quality by the TGA. But they have to be individualised for each patient with a script and can't be made in bulk. There are fears some are doing just that.
These drugs are known. We can't tell people whether they work, and it's really the safety aspect that concerns us most for the community.
It comes amid a Four Corners investigation. Now the TGA wants to ban pharmacists from making GLP-1 agonist drugs like Ozempic.
All of those drugs will be removed from the compounding exemptions.
Consumer groups worry for diabetic patients.
We're really calling on the government to try and do more in this space to get a better supply of Ozempic into Australia.
While they welcome the crackdown, pharmacists say the law is already adequate.
The TGA needs to play a more active role in oversight of these pharmacies that are manufacturing in large quantities.
While the TGA waits for feedback on the proposed ban, the ABC understands there are a number of ongoing state and federal investigations into compounding pharmacies. As part of that, the agency raided a compounding pharmacy in Melbourne yesterday, seizing a large amount of semaglutide, peptides and human growth hormones. The TGA will allege they've been made illegally and say they hold serious safety concerns about the medications. Elise Worthington, ABC News.
It's a tough time for many people at the moment, with higher interest rates and cost of living pressures squeezing household budgets. But despite that, the latest data shows house prices are still rising, bouncing back from what looked like a start of a downturn late last year.
On a hot day, this family's coming to inspect what some real estate agents might call a renovator's delight.
It needs work, as you'd expect. We knew that coming in. For us, we need to be able to live in a place as we fix it up with the two little kids.
But agent Luke Secco is confident the corner house in Australia's second biggest market will be hot property when it goes under the hammer.
With the talk of rates coming off or dropping, we're finding that there's more buyers out there and the market's picking up.
Figures from CoreLogic show prices rose nationally by 0.6% in February and nearly 9% over the year. Perth led the monthly gains, followed by Adelaide, Brisbane, Canberra, the regions, Sydney, Melbourne and Darwin, while Hobart went backwards. Rents also had the strongest monthly rise since March last year, up 0.9%. The results are surprising to some due to the current state of the economy, with rising unemployment, higher interest rates and cost of living pressures squeezing household budgets.
It looks like the housing market has actually avoided a cyclical downswing. That's where it looked like the market was going at the end of last year.
Economists say prospective buyers are optimistic about the potential for an interest rate cut later this year. And house prices are holding up because not enough properties are up for sale.
Some predictions are that house prices might continue to rise this year. Does that factor into any decision making?
Yeah, you always worry about the ladder being pulled up and never being able to get on.
A hope shared by many reaching for the Australian dream. Nadia Daly, ABC News.
Staying on property matters, and a sinkhole has opened up at an industrial site in Sydney South, causing a partial building collapse. Emergency services were called to West Botany Street in Rockdale following reports a large area of ground had collapsed. Thankfully, no one was injured. The sinkhole opened directly above the construction of the new M6 tunnel, damaging a nearby industrial building. Turning to finance, now here's David Chow.
13 rate hikes from the Reserve Bank have barely put a dent in house prices. Now they're starting to rise again more quickly. On growing speculation, there'll be rate cuts. And the numbers are eye-watering when you consider how much prices have gone up since the dark days of COVID, especially in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, where prices have hit record highs. Now, here's how much prices have risen in dollar terms. In 4 years, most cities have risen by around $200,000 to $300,000, which widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And demand from foreign buyers has hit its highest level in 6 years. But keep in mind, they've bought up 10% of new properties and just 4% of existing housing. So most of the competition, by far, is domestic. Meanwhile, it was a decent day for the share market, which rose 0.6% to finish at a record high. And it's up 1.4% over the week on bets that a rate cut might happen sooner rather than later. Today, shares of Life 360 surged 38.5%. It's a company with an app to help parents track the live location of their children. And it reported a full-year loss of $28 million, which is a huge improvement compared to last year. Lithium stocks did well, but healthcare companies were the worst performers. And there was a lot of enthusiasm overseas, with markets in Japan and the US also hitting record highs, while gold is at its highest level in a month, and the Aussie dollar is buying just over 65 US cents. And that's finance.
A career best innings from all-rounder Cameron Green has put Australia in a strong position at stumps on day 2 of the first test against New Zealand in Wellington. Green finished on 174 not out after a record last wicket partnership with Josh Hazlewood before Australia dismissed the Black Caps for a modest 179.
New Zealand will want to get rid of this pair.
New Zealand needed only one wicket to wrap up Australia's innings, but that wicket would prove elusive.
Oh, goodness me. Wow.
Number 11, Josh Hazlewood, did his best impersonation of a top-order batter, and Cameron Green showed why selectors promoted him to number 4.
What a way to bring up 150. The first time past that milestone.
The pair combined for 116, Australia's highest ever 10th wicket partnership against New Zealand. Green was unbeaten on 174.
This session has been a disaster for New Zealand. But
there were more calamities to come, with the world's top-ranked batter, Kane Williamson, out for a duck.
Run, got to hurry, he's a mix-up. Well, I cannot believe it. Will Young's looking, can't believe it, and then he takes off, and then, oh no. Bang, bang, they run into one another. Great piece of throwing.
Some could no longer bear to watch as the Black Caps crashed to 5 for 29.
To get out like that, gut-wrencher.
Glenn Phillips made a counter-attacking 71.
Oh, what a shot that is.
Nathan Lyon picked up 4 wickets as the home team was dismissed for 179. Australia chose not to enforce the follow-on, but might have wished it had.
Got him! Yes, he's got one!
Tim Southey soon had 2 as Marnus Labuschagne's run of outs continued. And it could have been even better for the Black Caps, with night watchman Lyon dropped on the last ball of an eventful day. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
The father of Matilda's superstar Sam Kerr says she is definitely out of the Paris Olympics in July as she continues to recover from a knee injury. Kerr ruptured an anterior cruciate ligament while in a mid-season training camp with the team Chelsea in Morocco in January. The Matildas qualified for the Paris Olympics after a 10-0 thrashing of Uzbekistan in Melbourne this week. Team management says Kerr will be medically assessed in April and a decision made on her inclusion then. But Roger Kerr says his daughter is out.
He's in rehab now in Chelsea, and it's a lonely life, rehab. You're by yourself and just plugging away with the rehab things. But she's mentally well, and she's disappointed that she's missed the Olympics, but hopefully she'll be back within 12 months.
To the weather. And last night, minimum temperatures were generally close to average across the state, ranging between 11 and 15 degrees. It was coldest at Casterton, Mortlake, Yanaki and Yarram, where the temperature dropped to 8. Today, patchy fog in the south cleared during the morning to a dry and mostly sunny day. Apart from isolated showers in the far northeast during the afternoon, it was mild to warm with light westerly winds in afternoon, coastal sea breezes, warmest at Mildura and Swan Hill, where it hit 36. In Melbourne today, we reached our high of 28.1 degrees at 2:30 this afternoon, 32 degrees in Coldstream. Interstate, it was cloudy in Sydney, Hobart and Adelaide, sunny in Brisbane and Perth, Darwin showers. The satellite image is showing areas of cloud cover over the northern half of the country and inland New South Wales. There are extensive areas of cloud over parts of Western Australia and SA, straight into the Great Australian Bight. Patchy cloud extends across coastal regions of New South Wales as well as over Victoria and western half of Tasmania. A mild southwesterly airstream will continue tonight as part of a high-pressure ridge extending across the state. Winds will tend cooler southerly on Saturday as a weak cold front crosses Bass Strait, then continues onto Sunday as another front clips southern Victoria. There'll be showers and storms over northern WA, the NT, Central Australia and northern Queensland. Showers and possible storms over parts of South Australia and New South Wales. Showers and brisk winds over Tasmania. For the capital cities, it'll be partly cloudy in Adelaide and Hobart, sunny in Brisbane, showers for Perth, Sydney and Darwin. Back home, warm and dry and mostly sunny across the north part, apart from the chance of showers and thunderstorms across the northern Mallee during the morning and afternoon. 22 for Hamilton, 26 in Bendigo. A mostly cloudy morning in the south with isolated light showers, then a mild, dry, cool, partly cloudy afternoon. Light to moderate southerly winds, fresh at times about the central ranges. 23 in Sale, 32 in Albury-Wodonga. On the Bay, 15 to 20 knots southerlies will decrease to 10 to 15 knots in the evening, waves around 1 metre. Tomorrow in Melbourne will be cloudy with a medium chance of showers, most likely in the morning, heading for a top of 21 after an overnight low of 16. Looking ahead, partly cloudy on Sunday, 20. Monday, partly cloudy, 22. Tuesday, warming up, sunny and 31. Wednesday, partly cloudy, 29. Thursday, partly cloudy, 26. And Friday, partly cloudy, 30. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow night from 7. Until then, stay safe, go well. Good night.